My name is Elena. I am 28 years old and I live in New York City. My phone lit up at 4:12 p.m. on an ordinary Wednesday. I glanced down at the screen and saw a name that hadn't popped up in over 9 months. It was my dad. The text was brief. Family dinner tonight. Big update on the business. Be there. I read it twice. For the past 9 months, my inbox from them had been a ghost town. No check-ins, no holiday cards, no "how's life" messages. To my family, I was invisible. But that morning, everything shifted. At 7:30 a.m., the Wall Street Journal dropped their latest edition. My name was splashed in the finance section. Beside it, a headline about my investment firm and one key figure, a $75 million client contract. It wasn't random. They hadn't magically remembered me. They hadn't woken up missing their daughter, Elena. They saw the news. They saw the dollars. I used to ache when they brushed me off. I used to chase scraps of their approval. But reading that text, I didn't feel pain. I felt ice. They think they're summoning their overlooked, eager-to-please daughter. But they're mistaken. They're summoning a vault. And they don't realize this vault is locking shut. But before I dive into how the tables turned, like and subscribe. Leave a comment. Where are you tuning in from? My name is Elena. I am 28 years old. To grasp why that text left me frozen, you need to know about the evening of the storm. You need to know the night I thought I'd finally arrived. It was 18 months ago, the night of my firm's landmark deal announcement. In the finance world, landing a $15 million seed contract is huge. It signals you're not just hustling, you're a force. I'd clinched it after grinding 16-hour days for weeks. I'd survived ramen budgets, crashed on friends' couches, and faced boardrooms of skeptics who dismissed me as too young, too female. They looked at me like I was a kid playing dress-up in a suit. But I pushed through the doubts, the rejections, the endless revisions to my pitch deck. I nailed it. I triumphed. I craved a real celebration. Not with colleagues or investors, but with the ones meant to care unconditionally. I reserved a rooftop suite at Aurelia, the swankiest spot in Manhattan. The kind my parents adored. Velvet booths, panoramic skyline views, servers in crisp white uniforms who anticipated your every need. I pre-ordered the caviar platter my mom always raved about, the rare single malt whiskey my dad favored from his collection stories. I even added the artisanal cheeses and fresh oysters that my sister Mia loved to post about on her social media. I arrived at 6:30 p.m. in a sharp black pantsuit. I'd agonized over it for hours in the boutique, wanting to radiate success and poise, wanting them to see me and say, "We're proud, Elena. You did it. You've made us so happy." By 6:45 p.m., the suite was still empty, except for the soft jazz playing in the background. I checked my phone obsessively. Nothing. No missed calls. No apologies for delays. They're probably stuck in that infamous New York traffic, I told the hostess with a forced smile. She smiled back sympathetically and refilled my sparkling water with a slice of lemon. At 7:15 p.m., I messaged my sister Mia. "Hey, everything good? I'm here at Aurelia." No quick reply. The space felt vast and echoing with 5 empty seats around the elegantly set table. One for me, one for Mom, one for Dad, one for my older sister Mia, and one for my younger brother Alex. They mocked me like a silent jury, judging my hopes. At 7:30 p.m., a text finally came from Mia. "Sorry, Elle. Work emergency cropped up. Rain check?" I knew she wasn't on call that night. Her consulting firm had standard hours, and she'd posted about her relaxed evening plans earlier that day. She was dodging, but I didn't call her out. I just replied, "Sure, soon. Miss you." Minutes later, Mom chimed in. "Darling, my back is absolutely killing me today. I can't even think about driving. So sorry. Send pics of the amazing view." My throat tightened like a vice. My chest felt heavy, as if the air in the room had thickened. I scrolled through Twitter on impulse. Bad move, I know, but curiosity won. My cousin's feed had a fresh post, a lively gathering with thumping music and colorful lights. In the corner of the video, Mom, champagne flute in hand, dancing and laughing with abandon. No sign of back pain whatsoever. She looked vibrant, carefree. She was at Alex's impromptu startup pitch party. Alex, the eternal family favorite, who just launched a vague app idea with zero traction or business plan. But he threw a bash with influencers and free drinks, and they picked that over my hard-earned $15 million win. Dad didn't even bother texting. He just vanished, as if my achievement was a non-event. I lingered in that stunning suite another 45 minutes, staring at the untouched appetizers. The hostess returned, her voice gentle and hesitant. "Ready to order the mains, miss? Or should we wait a bit longer?" I eyed the empty seats, the wilting garnishes on the caviar, the melting ice around the oysters. "No," I whispered, my voice barely audible over the jazz. "Just the bill, please." It totaled $350 for a ghost party, food barely touched. I paid it without flinching outwardly, but inside it burned. I stepped out of Aurelia into the downpour outside, letting the rain drench my carefully chosen pantsuit, smear my makeup, mat my hair. Tears blended seamlessly with the raindrops, silent and unseen by the passers-by rushing under umbrellas. That wasn't the only time they let me down. It was just the one that finally shattered something inside me. The neglect was a lifelong pattern, etched in every milestone I'd ever reached. At 12, I aced the National Math Olympiad, coding a basic AI model that predicted simple patterns. I was beaming with pride, clutching my handmade certificate. The ceremony was midweek in a grand hall downtown. "Can't make it, Elena," Dad grunted over his morning coffee, not even glancing up from his tablet. "Alex has basketball practice, and it's a big one. But Alex practices every single day," I protested, my voice small but insistent. "This is the Nationals. It's once in a lifetime." "Don't be so dramatic," Mom huffed from the kitchen, snapping her magazine shut. "Your brother needs our support right now. He's the star player on his team." They went to the game instead. Alex's team lost badly, but they consoled him with burgers and shakes afterward, posting proud photos online. I accepted my trophy solo on that stage, the MC scanning the crowd for any family members to wave at. His eyes met mine with pity when he realized I was alone. It stung like a slap. I hid the award in my backpack, never mentioned it at home. They never inquired, never noticed. At my college commencement, they dipped out right after the speeches because Uncle Luis complained about the heat and wanted to hit the bar early. When I launched my first small fund right out of school, I nervously sought Dad's advice, a mere introduction to a couple of his contacts in the industry. "Elena, finance is a cutthroat world," he sighed, like I was asking for the impossible. "You're too soft for it, too idealistic. Maybe focus on finding a stable job or a good partner instead." Days later, he casually funded Alex's $30,000 prototype for a gadget that never made it past the drawing board, laughing it off as investing in potential. They didn't despise me outright. Despise would have required emotional investment, some level of care. No, it was worse. They were indifferent. I was just backdrop in their lives. Reliable Elena, who never caused waves or demanded the spotlight. They resented my self-reliance because it meant I didn't need their constant rescues like Mia and Alex, who were perpetual disasters. Mia with her string of failed relationships and job hops. Alex with his endless ideas that burned through cash. They got all the attention, all the bailouts, all the love. So that Wednesday text, coming hot on the heels of my WSJ spotlight, sparked no warmth or hope in me. I recalled the storm-soaked walk from Aurelia, the empty suite, the Olympiad stage, the dismissed advice, the bounced gifts. They weren't reaching out for their daughter. They were reaching for my newfound wallet, eyeing my $75 million contract as their personal lifeline to keep their illusions afloat. I stood in front of the full-length mirror in my spacious loft apartment. Wardrobe choices loomed before me like strategic pieces on a chessboard. I had an array of power suits, designer blazers from Milan, heels that commanded boardrooms and turned heads. I could strut in as the mogul I'd become, jewels flashing my ascent, watch them squirm under the weight of my success. I touched an emerald green gown hanging there. The fabric was luxurious, almost liquid under my fingers. It screamed dominance, power, unapologetic wealth. Then I paused, hand lingering. No. Showing up flashy would put them on high alert. They'd see the threat, the shark in the water. I needed them to see the old Elena. Meek, unassuming, still desperate for crumbs. When people feel superior, they get careless. They drop their guards, spill truths they shouldn't, reveal the ugliness beneath the polish. Arrogance breeds slips, and I wanted every slip on record in my mind. I chose faded jeans that had seen better days, a plain white tee with a faint coffee stain on the hem that I'd never bothered to replace, and worn sneakers scuffed from city streets. I pulled my hair into a loose, messy ponytail, skipping any product or style. No jewelry, no makeup, just a touch of lip balm. Mirror check. I looked ordinary, weary, a bit rumpled. The Elena they dismissed as practical or boring. Ideal for the trap. Perfect, I murmured to my reflection, a small smile creeping in. I headed down to the underground garage. My gleaming Tesla Model S waited there, sleek, black, and new, a symbol of my hard-won independence. Beside it sat my 2014 hatchback, scratched from years of parallel parking wars, dusty from disuse, with a faint dent on the rear fender from a minor fender bender I'd never fixed. I kept it for low-key runs, like grocery hauls or days when I wanted to blend into the background. Tonight was one of those days. I grabbed its keys. The motor grumbled to life with a familiar rattle, the AC wheezed like an old asthmatic, and the scent of stale takeout and forgotten gym clothes lingered in the cabin. It was the aroma of my scrappy past, before the contracts and the loft. The trek to Willow Creek Golf Club took 35 minutes through the bustling city traffic. En route, the old nerves tried to stir back to life. It was a physical thing, like a knot twisting in my gut, my hands white-knuckling the steering wheel too tight. My brain started replaying the old tapes, the familiar criticisms. You're too intense, Elena. Why can't you be more laid back like Alex? You always overthink everything and ruin the fun. I took a deep, steadying breath, focusing on the road ahead, the honks of taxis fading into white noise. I'm not that girl anymore, I told myself firmly. I'm the founder and CEO of a top-tier investment firm. I lead a team of 150 professionals. I close deals that shift fortunes and shape markets. I've outmaneuvered sharper, more ruthless foes than my own family. They cling to an outdated version of me, a memory that's no longer real. That mantra centered me. I pulled up to the ornate gate of the club. The guard eyed my beat-up hatchback with open suspicion, leaning out of his booth with a frown. Staff and deliveries use the service entrance around back, he said rudely, waving dismissively. I lowered the window fully, keeping my expression neutral. I'm here for the Reyes family gathering, I said plainly, no hint of defensiveness. Name's Elena Reyes. He checked his clipboard slowly, frowning deeper. He glanced back at my car, then at the list again, as if debating whether to believe me. Right. Go on through, he muttered finally, looking bored and unconvinced. No respect in his tone? Perfect. That was exactly part of the ploy. I wanted to fly under the radar, to be underestimated from the start. I drove up the long, winding driveway lined with manicured hedges and blooming flower beds. The landscaping was impeccable. Every blade of grass trimmed to uniform height, every petal in precise arrangement. It was all surface perfection, all facade, just like my family, polished on the outside but rotting within. I parked the hatchback right in the front row of the valet area, deliberately slotting it between Dad's pristine Lexus SUV, waxed to a mirror shine, and Mia's flashy Audi convertible. My clunker stood out like a deliberate blemish, a stain on their luxury lineup. I killed the engine and sat in the sudden silence for a moment, gathering my resolve. This was the viper pit, the source of my deepest scars, the place where I'd been diminished time and again. But tonight, I wasn't the prey. I looked at my phone one last time before stepping out. There was a text from Marcus, my trusted COO and right-hand man. All documents are prepped and ready. I'm on standby if you need me to join. Just give the word. My fingers flew across the screen. Give me 20 minutes to set the stage. I pocketed the phone, checked my face in the rearview mirror one more time. I made sure my expression was completely neutral. No anger bubbling up. No excitement gleaming in my eyes. Just a blank, unreadable page. I opened the car door. The air outside smelled of fresh-cut grass, mingled with hints of expensive cologne and cigar smoke wafting from the club. I walked up the wide stone steps to the heavy oak doors, my heart beating slow and steady like a metronome. Thump, thump, thump. I wasn't walking in to beg for affection or validation. I wasn't walking in to flaunt my achievements. I was walking in to close a transaction, to execute a plan years in the making. I pushed the doors open with a firm hand. I stepped into the Emerald Lounge, the private dining room they'd booked. The walls were paneled in rich mahogany, and a massive crystal chandelier hung overhead like a frozen cascade of light. In the center stood an oval table set for 5. This time, there were no empty chairs staring back at me. Everyone was already there, seated and waiting. My father sat at the head of the table, commanding as always, dressed in his charcoal suit that he wore like armor when he wanted to intimidate. My mother was beside him, her dress sparkling under the lights with sequins that caught every flicker. My siblings, Mia and Alex, sat across from them, looking polished but with tells. Mia's nails bitten short from stress, Alex scrolling his phone absent-mindedly. Uncle Luis was already there, of course, nursing a tumbler of bourbon, his cheeks flushed. As soon as my sneakers hit the plush carpet, the performance kicked into high gear. "Elena!" Mom trilled, her voice high-pitched and theatrical, like an actress hitting her mark. She bolted up from her chair so quickly that it scraped loudly against the polished floor. She rushed over to me, arms outstretched. Before I could even mutter a greeting, she enveloped me in a tight embrace. She smelled overwhelmingly of her signature expensive perfume, floral and heavy, and stiff hairspray. The hug was tight, almost suffocating, held for exactly 3 seconds too long. It was a hug meant for an audience, a show of affection, not genuine warmth for a long-lost daughter. She pulled back, holding me at arm's length to look at me, her eyes scanning but not really seeing. "We've missed you terribly, sweetie," she said, using that old nickname Sweetie she hadn't dusted off since I was in pigtails. Usually it was just Elena, or a curt, "Hey you." "Hi, Mom," I said evenly, my voice calm and measured. I didn't hug her back. I let my arms hang loosely by my sides. She either didn't notice or chose to ignore it. She guided me to the table like I was a prize pony at a show, parading me for the others. "Look who's finally made time for us," Dad bellowed, his voice booming across the room. He stood up slowly, extending his large hand for a shake. My father is the imposing man, broad-shouldered, and he likes to crush your hand in his grip to establish dominance, to remind you he's the alpha. I took his hand without hesitation. His squeeze was hard, vice-like. I squeezed back just as firmly, channeling every boardroom negotiation I'd won. He looked surprised for a fraction of a second, his eyes widening almost imperceptibly, but he covered it quickly with a loud, hearty laugh that didn't reach his eyes. Sit down," he said, gesturing to the chair. "We've got the Veuve Clicquot chilling already, the finest vintage, only the best for a night like this." I settled into the seat between Mia and Uncle Luis. Mia glanced at me sideways, her suit expensive but her tie slightly crooked, eyes a bit bloodshot from what I guessed was a long lunch. "Hey, sis," she said with a smirk that didn't hide the edge. "Nice outfit. Thrift store chic, or is that the new minimalist trend?" "Mia," Mom scolded lightly, but she was smiling indulgently, like it was all in good fun. "Don't tease your sister. She's being practical. That's how the smart ones stay ahead, right, Elena? Saving every penny." "Something like that," I murmured neutrally, unfolding my linen napkin and placing it carefully on my lap. The waiter arrived right on cue with the champagne. He popped the cork with a soft, satisfying thump and poured the golden, bubbling liquid into the tall flutes with practiced elegance. My father raised his glass high, the light catching the bubbles. "To kin," he said grandly, "and to triumphs big and small." "To kin," everyone echoed, clinking glasses. I lifted mine in the toast, but I didn't drink. I just watched them over the rim, watched how they gulped it down greedily, as if toasting to something they already assumed was theirs. "So?" Alex said casually, his eyes still half on his phone as he scrolled through Instagram. He didn't even bother looking up fully. "I saw that WSJ piece this morning, $75 million contract. That's wild, sis. Congrats or whatever." "It's a partnership valuation, Alex," I corrected softly, keeping my tone quiet and unassuming. It's not cash sitting in the bank. It means our clients and investors see that much potential in the firm's strategies. Still, my father said, waving his hand dismissively as if details were beneath him. It's damn impressive. Who would have thought? Our quiet little Elena turning into a finance queen overnight. It's tech finance, Dad, I said, not raising my voice. We streamline algorithmic trading platforms for hedge funds and institutions. Right, he replied, clearly not listening, his eyes glazing over the technical part. Numbers and computer wizardry. Very smart stuff. I always knew you'd have it in you, kid. Uncle Luis slurped his bourbon loudly, setting the glass down with a clink. I told you all along, Carlos, he said, pointing a finger. I said, that girl's got the Reyes grit in her bones. The real Miller work ethic. Wait, Reyes, I mean. I almost laughed out loud at that. Uncle Luis hadn't held a real job in over 20 years, living off the remnants of a trust fund from Grandpa that he was steadily depleting on golf and booze. The Reyes grit he was touting was a myth. My father had inherited the advisory firm from Grandpa and coasted on it. Mia had been handed a cushy role she was barely qualified for. Alex didn't work at all, bouncing from one passion project to the next. I was the only one who'd built something from absolute zero, scraping together my first fund with personal savings and sheer will. But tonight, they were rewriting the family history on the fly. Tonight my success was suddenly a Reyes trait, proof of their superior genes. We are just so proud of you, Mom gushed, reaching across the table to pat my hand. Her touch was cold, her rings digging slightly into my skin. I was telling all the ladies at the bridge club today about it. My Elena is in the Wall Street Journal. They were green with envy. Absolutely green. That was the real currency for her. Bragging rights. She didn't care about the sleepless nights I'd endured or the risks I'd taken. She cared that she could drop my name like a status symbol, an accessory to elevate her social standing, like a new designer handbag or a vacation photo from the Maldives. So Mia leaned in closer, her breath hinting at the champagne. How does it feel to be the rich one now, huh? The big shot? I don't feel any different. I lied smoothly, keeping my eyes on my napkin. Come on, Mia laughed, a bit too loudly. You must have splurged on something cool. A yacht? A penthouse in the sky? Private jet membership? No, I said simply. I reinvested most of the capital back into the company. We're expanding, hiring 40 new analysts next quarter to handle the influx. The table went silent for a beat, the clinking of silverware pausing. They looked disappointed, almost deflated. They wanted to hear tales of extravagance, of spending sprees and luxury toys. That's what they understood. Consumption, not creation. They didn't grasp building something sustainable. Well, Dad cleared his throat awkwardly. That's very responsible of you. Boring but responsible. Good on you. The appetizers arrived then, a lavish spread. Foie gras on toasted brioche, seared scallops in butter sauce, truffle-infused tartar. It was a feast fit for kings. Dig in, Dad said loudly, making sure the waiter heard. It's on me tonight. As if footing the bill for dinner was some grand, heroic gesture after years of emotional stinginess. As we ate, the conversation predictably shifted to them. Alex droned on about his latest content empire, complaining bitterly about how the algorithms were shadow banning him unfairly. You should totally let me promote your firm on my channels, Alex said, chewing with his mouth open, bits of scallop visible. I could get you so many leads. We could do a collab. Family discount, obviously. It'd be epic. My app is for commercial algorithmic trading, Alex, I said mildly. I don't think your followers are looking to optimize billion-dollar hedge fund strategies. Alex rolled his eyes dramatically. You're so literal, Elle. It's about the vibes, the energy. Exposure is exposure. Mia jumped in next, griping about the hell at the office, the family advisory firm where she worked. The unions are a nightmare, she grumbled, spearing a scallop. They want everything. Breaks, overtime pay, benefits. It's impossible to turn a profit with all these demands. I knew for a fact that Mia usually left the office by 2 p.m. to hit the golf course or spa appointments. Mom followed with her saga about the kitchen renovations at their Hamptons lake house. The quartz countertops were alabaster, Elena, she said, her eyes wide with mock tragedy. And I specifically ordered pearl white. Can you imagine the horror? It's like no one takes pride in craftsmanship anymore. That sounds terrible, I said, keeping my face completely flat, no sarcasm leaking through. It is, she sighed deeply, fanning herself. Nobody is competent these days. It's all rush, no attention to detail. I cut into my foie gras. It was perfectly prepared, rich and buttery, but it tasted like cardboard in my mouth amid their superficial chatter. They were treating me like an old friend suddenly rediscovered, laughing at inside jokes, including me in the banter, pouring more wine into my glass without asking. If a stranger glanced at our table, they'd see a happy, affluent family enjoying a midweek dinner, toasting to life. But I saw the cracks beneath the veneer. I saw how Dad checked his gold watch every 5 minutes, impatient. I saw how Mom's smile vanished the instant she thought no one was looking, replaced by a tight line. I saw how Mia kept tapping her foot nervously under the table, her heel clicking softly. They were anxious, rushing through the small talk like it was the obligatory script. They were being nice, but it was strained, an effort. It was like watching amateur actors fumbling their lines in a bad play. They were buttering me up, softening the target for the inevitable ask. I decided to help them along, to speed up the reveal. I wanted to see the pitch in full, to gauge exactly how much they thought I was worth to them now. I put my fork down gently, wiped my mouth with the napkin. So, I said, looking directly at my father across the table, the text mentioned you had important news about a business expansion. The air in the room changed instantly, like a switch flipped. The laughter stopped abruptly. The chewing halted. Dad straightened his tie with a deliberate tug, sitting up taller in his chair. He exchanged a quick, rehearsed look with Mom. It was subtle, but I caught it. Showtime. Yes, Dad said, his voice dropping an octave to what he considered his serious businessman tone. I'm glad you brought that up, Elena. He signaled the waiter discreetly to clear the appetizer plates. We have an exciting opportunity on the horizon. Something that's going to change the trajectory of this family forever. I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms loosely. I'm listening, I said, my tone encouraging but neutral. The waiter cleared the last plate efficiently and closed the heavy door behind him, leaving us in the intimate silence of the Emerald Lounge. My father reached down beside his chair and pulled up a sleek black portfolio case. He set it on the table with a heavy, authoritative thud. He clicked the latches open, snap, snap, and pulled out a thick, glossy folder. He slid it across the white tablecloth toward me with a flourish. The cover featured a stunning rendering of a gleaming high-rise tower, all glass and steel, with palm trees and fountains photoshopped around the base for that extra touch of fantasy. In bold gold letters at the bottom, it read, Reyes Capital Tower, a new era of excellence. Open it, he urged, his eyes gleaming with what he thought was visionary passion. I opened the folder slowly. Inside were pages of architectural renderings, sleek lobbies, rooftop gardens, state-of-the-art conference rooms, along with colorful pie charts, bar graphs, and paragraphs crammed with buzzwords like innovation, elite synergy, transformative growth, and exclusive experiences. You know, the advisory firm has been the backbone of this family for 35 years, Dad began, clasping his hands on the table like a preacher. Your grandpa built the first office from the ground up. I expanded it to 3 branches across the state. But the market is evolving rapidly, Elena. Clients don't want those old strip mall setups anymore. They want prestige. They want experiences. He pointed a thick finger at the main drawing of the skyscraper palace. This is the future, he declared. We're going to demolish the main site off the boulevard, the old Reyes Advisors building, and build this, a 5-star financial hub. Concierge services, AI-integrated lounges, premium membership starting at $500K annually. It's going to be breathtaking. Absolutely stunning, Mom added eagerly, her eyes shining with excitement. We're going to have a rooftop Zen garden with water features. I'm designing it myself, importing rare orchids from Asia. It's a guaranteed winner, Mia jumped in, nodding vigorously. We've done the market research. The demographics in the area are perfect. High net worth individuals craving that next level service. I flipped through the pages, but I didn't linger on the pretty pictures or the glossy promises. I honed in on the numbers tucked in the corners, the fine print projections. This is an ambitious project, I said calmly, my voice even. Construction costs alone look like $12 million. 14, actually, Dad corrected quickly, puffing up a bit. To do it right, with all the bells and whistles. And you have the financing lined up? I asked, flipping to the financial summary. Dad cleared his throat again, taking a slow sip of water. This was the pivot point, the moment the mask started to slip just a hair. We have the primary backers committed, he said smoothly, his words practiced. The bank's on board for the main construction loan, but you know how banks operate these days. They're all bureaucracy and red tape. They want to see a certain amount of liquid capital up front before they release the big funds. It's like a bridge, a temporary buffer to get things moving. He paused for effect, leaning forward slightly. He looked at me with what he intended as a warm, fatherly expression. To me, it looked like a wolf sizing up a lamb, deciding where to bite first. We realized, he continued, that we shouldn't be handing all this interest over to strangers at the bank. We should keep it in the family where it belongs. That's why we want to offer you the chance to be a part of this, from the ground floor. A part of it? I asked, feigning mild curiosity. Exactly, Mia said, cutting to the chase a bit too eagerly. We need a buffer loan to clear some old liens and break ground right away. How much are we talking? I asked, locking eyes with Dad. Dad met my gaze steadily, his expression serious. $1.2 million. The number landed like a stone in still water. The room went deadly silent. They were all watching me now. Mom twisting her diamond ring nervously. Alex finally putting down his phone. Uncle Luis mid-sip. $1.2 million, I repeated slowly, letting the words hang. It's a loan, Dad said quickly, reassuringly. With solid interest, 5% compounded. We'll pay you back in, say, 18 months. That's way better than what you'd get in any savings account or bond these days. And think of it as an investment in your own legacy, sweetie. This tower, it's going to be something we pass down to our grandchildren, Mom said softly, her voice laced with emotion. Don't you want to be part of building that? Part of the family story? And, frankly, Uncle Luis mumbled, slurring slightly from the bourbon, it's the right thing to do. The family supported you when you were just starting out. Now that you've hit it big, it's time to give back a little. I felt a sharp spike of anger rise in my chest at that last part, but I pushed it down deep. The family supported me? I thought about the time I'd asked Dad for a modest $3,000 seed investment for my first fund, and he'd laughed it off, telling me to get a real job. I thought about the ramen noodle dinners, the secondhand laptop I'd coded on, the endless silence from them during my struggles. You mentioned the bank is First Union, I said, keeping my voice neutral. And that client retention is just seasonal dips. Oh, absolutely, Dad said, nodding vigorously. We've been with them for decades. They love the project. They just need us to show some skin in the game up front. That's standard operating procedure in big developments like this. And they're okay with the current client retention rates? I asked, turning another page in the folder. Mia shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Retention is... it's seasonal, like Dad said. A little down. But that's exactly why we're pivoting to this new model. The old advisory setup is outdated. This tower will bring in fresh blood. Right, I said thoughtfully. So you need the $1.2 million to bridge things, demolish the old building, and start fresh on this vision. Precisely. Dad smiled broadly, thinking he had me hooked. He thought the glossy folder and the family guilt trip had sealed the deal. He thought I was still the naive daughter who just wanted to please her daddy, that my checkbook was already opening. It's a no-brainer, Elena. And honestly, we could go to outside investors. We have people lining up, begging to get in on this ground floor. But Mom and I discussed it at length and we said, no, let's give Elena the first right of refusal. We want to honor you and your achievements. Honor me, I said flatly, no inflection. Yes, Mom chimed in. We are so incredibly proud. And this way, We can all be true partners. A united family business for generations. They were leaning in now, the predators sensing blood in the water. 1.2 million, I said again, as if mulling it over. And you need it by when? By the end of the month, Dad replied promptly. To keep the construction schedule on track and avoid any delays. That's very soon, I noted. Business moves fast, Elena, Dad said condescendingly, like he was schooling a novice. You have to be decisive in this game. I am decisive, I said calmly. I closed the glossy folder with a soft snap and placed my hands flat on top of it. But I do have a few questions first. Of course. Dad waved his hand magnanimously, leaning back. Ask away. Transparency is key in family deals. You said the bank is First Union, I reiterated. And that retention is just a little down. And you called the firm the backbone of the family. Yes, and yes, Dad said, still smiling confidently. I reached into my tote bag at my feet. I didn't pull out a checkbook or my wallet. Instead, I pulled out a thin, sleek laptop. I turned it on, the screen glowing a soft blue in the dim, elegant lighting of the lounge. That's funny, I said, my fingers tapping lightly on the keys. Because I did a little research before I came here tonight. Public records are such fascinating things these days. Everything's digitized and accessible. Dad's smile faltered just a little, the corners twitching. What do you mean? He asked, his tone shifting slightly. Well, I said, scrolling through a document I'd prepared. According to the SEC filings and county records, First Union didn't approve any construction loan renewal. In fact, they filed a notice of default against Reyes Advisors 3 months ago. The silence that followed wasn't the eager anticipation of a deal closing. It was the heavy silence of a bomb that had just been dropped on the table, ticking, but not yet exploded. That's a misunderstanding, Dad stammered, his face starting to flush red. Just a paperwork error. We're sorting it out with them right now. And, I continued, my voice steady and cold as steel, client retention isn't seasonal. It's been under 35% for the last 2 years straight. You aren't pivoting because you have some grand vision, Dad. You're pivoting because the firm is bleeding cash like a sieve. I looked up from the laptop screen. I looked directly into his eyes, holding the gaze. You don't need $1.2 million for a bridge loan. You need $1.2 million to stop the bank from seizing the property next quarter. You're not just in trouble, you're insolvent. Mom gasped sharply, her hand flying to her mouth. Elena, how dare you use that word in this family? It's the truth, Mom, I said simply. The firm isn't a gold mine or a backbone. It's a sinking ship. And you invited me here tonight because you want me to pay for the lifeboats with my hard-earned success. Dad slammed his hand down on the table suddenly. The silverware rattled. A wine glass teetered. That is enough, he shouted, the fake warmth evaporating like mist. The mask had fallen completely off now. Who do you think you are, coming in here and investigating your own family like some kind of spy? We are offering you an opportunity, a chance to be part of something bigger. You are offering me a lie, I said, unflinching. We raised you, he yelled, his voice echoing off the mahogany walls. We put a roof over your head, food on the table. You owe us this. I owe you nothing, I said, standing up slowly. My legs felt a bit shaky from the adrenaline, but my voice was rock solid, unwavering. You ignored me for 9 months straight. You missed my landmark deal announcement. You missed out on my entire life. But the second you saw a dollar sign attached to my name in the WSJ, you remembered I existed. You selfish little... Mia started to stand up, her face twisted in anger. Sit down, Mia, I said sharply, my tone a command honed from years of leading teams. The authority in my voice was so strong that she actually sat back down, looking shocked and a bit cowed. I'm not done, I said, addressing all of them now. The fear in their eyes was starting to replace the initial anger. They realized I knew everything. They realized the game was up, the facade cracked beyond repair. You wanted to talk business tonight, I said. Okay, let's talk real business, not this fantasy tower nonsense you've cooked up. I tapped my wireless earpiece discreetly. Marcus, I said into the built-in microphone. Come in now. The heavy doors of the Emerald Lounge opened again with a soft whoosh. My COO, Marcus, walked in confidently. He was dressed in a sharp gray suit, carrying a thick stack of legal documents under his arm. He looked like an executioner, professional, impassive, ready to deliver the final blow. He walked straight to the table and stood beside me, not glancing at my family. He placed the documents in front of me with precision. "Everything is prepared as discussed, Elena," he said, his voice devoid of any emotion. I looked at my father. He was pale now, beads of sweat forming on his forehead. "I didn't come here to give you a loan, Dad," I said. "I don't lend money to failing businesses. It's a bad investment, and I'm not in the habit of throwing good money after bad." "Then why are you here?" Mom cried, her voice trembling on the verge of tears. "Why did you even come if not to help us?" I placed my hand flatly on the new stack of papers. "I'm here to make a purchase." The room was quiet, but it was a heavy, oppressive kind of quiet. It was the sound of held breaths, of dawning horror. My father was staring at the stack of papers under my hand, as if it were a venomous snake. He looked like a man who had just seen a ghost, or rather the ghost of his own failures, which he'd tried so desperately to bury under lies and bravado. Marcus stood beside me like a silent sentinel, his presence a shield against their glares. I opened the folder he'd brought. It wasn't the glossy, colorful brochure my father had presented with such fanfare. It didn't have aspirational pictures of palm trees or smiling executives in yoga poses. It was stark black and white, rows of cold numbers, tax liens, court filings, balance sheets in the red. It was the unflinching autopsy of the Reyes family business. "You called the firm the backbone of this family," I said, my voice steady as I picked up the first sheet. "But a backbone is supposed to hold you up, support you through tough times. This business isn't supporting anyone. It's dragging you all down into the depths." "You don't know what you're talking about," Mia snapped, trying to sound tough, but her voice cracked midway. "You sit behind spreadsheets all day. You don't know the reality of day-to-day operations, the human element. I know that you haven't paid your property taxes in 16 months, I said, sliding the tax delinquency document across the table. It stopped right in front of Mia's plate, like an accusation. "The county has already placed a lien on the land. That's not operations, Mia. That's public record, and it's negligence." Mia looked down at the paper, her eyes scanning the damning figures. She didn't touch it, as if it might burn her fingers. She looked like a deer caught in headlights. "Cash flow has been tight," Dad grunted, waving his hand dismissively, trying to regain control. "It's a temporary dip. The economy's been soft on everyone. Once we get the bridge loan in place, we'll clear the taxes first thing. It's standard practice in the industry." "Is it standard practice to borrow money from a hard money lender at 20% interest?" I asked, pulling out the next document. "You took out an equity loan 3 years ago, not from First Union, but from a private equity group in Vegas, known for predatory terms and aggressive collections." I pretended to scan the page, though I'd memorized every line weeks ago. "You used the equity strip from the firm to pay for... what was it?" "Ah, yes. Executive bonuses, fleet vehicle upgrades, and personal expenses." I eyed Mia's gleaming Rolex watch on her wrist, the diamond earrings dangling from Mom's ears, the key fob for Alex's sports car peeking from his pocket. "You drained the company's lifeblood to buy luxury cars, jewelry, and vacations. And now that the balloon payment is due, you don't have the cash to cover it." "We deserved those bonuses," Mom cried out, looking genuinely offended. "Your father works harder than anyone I know. He built this empire from the ground up. Do you expect us to live like paupers scraping by?" "I expect you to pay your debts," I said coolly. "That's what you always taught me, isn't it? A Reyes always pays their way. No excuses. That's what you said when I needed braces at 13 and you told me to get a weekend job flipping burgers to cover half the cost." Mom flinched visibly, her eyes darting away. She couldn't meet my gaze. "That was to teach you character," Dad said stiffly, his jaw set. "To make you strong and independent." "Well, it worked," I replied. "I have character now. And I also have solvency. You, on the other hand, have neither." I continued the methodical demolition. It felt surgical, precise. I wasn't shouting or emoting. I was just laying out the facts like exhibits in a trial. Client retention wasn't just down, it had cratered 35% year over year for 3 consecutive years. The online reviews were brutal, a litany of complaints. Hidden fees that add up to thousands. Outdated advice that lost me my portfolio. Fraudulent practices, stay away. Clients complain about everything these days, Uncle Luis bellowed, slamming his bourbon glass down hard enough to slosh liquid over the rim. They're entitled snowflakes. You can't please everyone in this business. You'd need at least $2. $5 million in immediate repairs just to bring the main building up to code, I said, ignoring his outburst. The plumbing burst during the last flood and was patched poorly. The servers are archaic, from the early 2000s. The south wing has structural issues that could lead to collapse if not addressed. The city inspector would condemn the place tomorrow if they did a spot check. I looked at my father directly. He was shrinking in his chair, deflating like a balloon losing air. He was usually such a commanding presence, filling the room with his loud voice and broad shoulders. Now he looked old, tired, diminished. You lied to me tonight, I said. You invited me here, plied me with champagne, and showed me pretty drawings of a tower that will never exist because the foundation is rotten. You told me you needed $1.2 million for an opportunity, but that money wouldn't build anything. It would just pay off the sharks in Vegas for another few months. It would buy you a little more time to pretend you're still rich and relevant. We are rich, Alex yelled suddenly, standing up so fast his chair knocked over backward with a thud. We're the Reyes family. We own half the advisory market in this town. You own nothing, Alex, I said calmly, not rising to his level. The bank owns the office. The lenders in Vegas own the equipment. The credit card companies own the rest. The cars, the vacations, even the club membership here. I gestured to the glossy resort folder he'd given me. This is a fantasy, I said. It's a sinking ship you've tried to paint gold. And you wanted me to come on board and chain myself to the deck with you. It's not a sinking ship, Dad roared, finding his voice again. He couldn't take the truth anymore. It was hurting him too much, stripping away his illusions. It's just a rough patch. Every business goes through them. You think you're so smart with your fancy firm and your venture contracts? You got lucky, Elena. You don't know what it's like to grind for 35 years, day in and day out. I know exactly what it's like, I said, my tone sharpening, because I watched you do the opposite. I watched you neglect the business while you played golf and took long lunches. I watched you promote Mia over more competent managers just because she shares your last name. I watched you ignore market changes, fintech disruptions, robo-advisors, because you were too arrogant to adapt or learn new things. I leaned forward slightly, pressing the point. The numbers don't lie, Dad. You are insolvent. You've been insolvent for 15 months. You've been robbing Peter to pay Paul, juggling debts like a circus act. And now Paul is at the door with a sledgehammer, ready to collect. Dad's face was purple now, veins bulging in his neck as he breathed hard. So that's it then? You come here, you wave your little papers around, you humiliate us in front of each other. You think you're better than us because of one lucky break? I don't think I'm better, I said. I think I'm honest. And I think I'm the only one at this table who actually knows how to run a business without running it into the ground. Then help us. Mom pleaded suddenly, her strategy shifting from defensiveness to begging in an instant. She reached for my hand across the table, but I pulled it away smoothly. Elena, please. If we don't get this money, we lose everything. The office, the lake house, the club membership, the cars. We'll be nothing. Ruined. You won't be nothing, Mom, I said. You'll just be normal, like everyone else who has to live within their means. I can't be normal, she sobbed, tears welling up. I can't face that. What will people say? The scandal at the club, the whispers. Helena, you can't let this happen to us. You have that $75 million contract. This is pocket change to you now. Just write the check, please. For your mother, if nothing else. I looked at her, watching the tears streak down her face. They were real tears, glistening under the chandelier light. But they weren't for me. She wasn't crying because she'd hurt her daughter or missed out on my life. She was crying for herself, for the loss of her status, her bridge club bragging rights, her illusion of superiority. The $75 million isn't cash in my pocket, Mom, I said, repeating what I'd told them earlier. I explained that. And even if it was, why would I pour it into a bad deal? Into a black hole? Because we are family, she screamed, the word exploding from her like a weapon. The word hung in the air, heavy and loaded. Family. It was the ultimate guilt trip, the card they always played when they wanted something from me. When they needed a bailout or a favor, we were family. When I needed support or presence, I was a stranger, an afterthought. I looked at the stack of papers one last time, the irrefutable evidence of their greed, incompetence, and years of mismanagement. That's the problem, I said softly, but with finality. You think family means you're entitled to the fruits of my labor. You think it means you can treat me like dirt for 28 years? Ignore my calls, skip my milestones, and then cash me in like a winning lottery ticket when times get tough. I closed the folder with a definitive snap. I'm done with the pitch. My answer is no. My refusal hit the room like a physical blow. A shockwave. For a few seconds, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. The waiter, who had been hovering discreetly near the door, sensing the tension, stepped out quietly and closed it tight behind him. We were sealed in now, the pressure building. Then the explosion came. You ungrateful little bitch. It was Mia, lunging forward across the table, her fists slamming down hard. The wine glasses shook violently, red wine spilling onto the pristine white tablecloth, spreading like a fresh bloodstain. Mia! Mom screamed, but she didn't make a move to stop her. The floodgates were open. You think you're so special? Mia yelled, her face twisted and ugly with rage. You think because you got your name in some newspaper you can talk down to us like this? You're nothing, Elena. You've always been a weird, quiet little freak who nobody liked. Dad should have kicked you out the day you turned 18. He practically did, I said calmly, unmoved. I left right after graduation because nobody asked me to stay or offered a hand. We fed you, Dad shouted, standing up now, looming over the table like a storm cloud. He pointed a shaking finger at me, his whole body trembling with fury. We put clothes on your back. We paid for your education. I paid for my own college, Dad, I corrected him evenly. Full scholarship, plus 3 part-time jobs to cover books and living. You sent me one check for $400 my freshman year. It bounced, remember? I had to cover the overdraft fee myself. You act like you were abused, Dad yelled, spittle flying. We gave you a good life, a home in a great neighborhood, vacations, everything. And this is how you repay us? By letting us drown while you sit on your pile of money? I'm not letting you drown, I said. You're already underwater from your own choices. I'm just refusing to jump in after you and sink too. It's only $1.2 million, Elena, Alex shouted, his voice whiny and petulant. He looked like a spoiled child denied a toy. That's nothing to you now. You're just being mean about it. You're doing this to punish us for whatever grudge you're holding. I'm not punishing you, I said. I'm making a sound business decision. The same way you all made a business decision to skip my deal announcement dinner. The same way you made a business decision to ignore my texts and calls for 9 months. That's different, Mom wailed, her tears flowing freely now, mascara running in black streaks. We were busy with life, with the firm, with everything. You can't hold a grudge forever, Elena. It's not Christian. It's not right to turn your back on blood. It's not a grudge, I said. It's data. I've analyzed the data of our so-called relationship over the years, and the return on investment is 0. Less than 0. It's been a net loss for me. Oh, listen to her, Uncle Luis sneered, his words slurring more from the booze, using her big fancy business words. Return on investment. You're cold, Elena. You've always been a block of ice. No wonder you don't have a husband or kids. No man wants a woman who counts every penny like a miser, who has no heart. The insult was designed to sting, to hit where it might hurt most. Years ago, it would have. Years ago, I would have crumbled under the barrage, tears welling, apologizing profusely just to make the yelling stop, writing the check for $1.2 million or more, just to buy 5 minutes of their approval, their fleeting love. But I wasn't that girl anymore. I'd outgrown that version of myself. I sat there perfectly still, my posture straight, watching them self-destruct in real time. They were throwing everything at me now, The guilt trips, the shaming, the raw anger, the desperate pleas. Dad tried playing the victim card next. "I'm an old man, Elena," he said, his voice dropping to a rasp. "My heart isn't what it used to be. The stress of all this, it could kill me. Do you want that on your conscience? Do you want to be the one who killed your own father?" "Your heart is fine, Dad," I said without missing a beat. "You played tennis here at the club just yesterday morning. I saw the scorecard logged on the member app." Mom shifted to martyr mode. "I gave up everything for you children," she sobbed. "I sacrificed my figure having you all. I sacrificed any career I could have had. And now, when I need just a little help, a tiny bit of support, my own daughter turns her back on me like I'm nothing." "You had a full-time nanny raising us, Mom," I reminded her. "And a housekeeper, a chef. You didn't sacrifice anything. You lived in luxury while the firm paid for it all." They kept going, the storm of noise intensifying. They called me selfish, arrogant, a traitor to the family name. They accused me of being heartless, of enjoying their pain. I let them scream, let them vent every last drop of vitriol. Inside, I felt a strange, unexpected sensation. I had expected to feel hurt, to feel the old sadness well up, but instead, I felt lighter with each barb. It was as if every insult they hurled was cutting another invisible cord that had bound me to them. Snip. There went the desperate need for their approval. Snip. There went the lingering hope that they might change one day. Snip. There went the guilt I'd carried for years. The, "what if I tried harder" wait. I realized in that moment that they had never truly seen me. Not as a person, not as their daughter. To them, I was just a resource. When I was a child, I was an emotional resource to ignore, making them feel important by comparison. Now, I was a financial resource to exploit, to rob so they could maintain their comfortable delusions. They were vampires, draining life without giving back. And I was finally closing the window, sealing the door. "Are you done?" I asked quietly, my voice cutting through their shouting like a knife. They stopped abruptly, panting and out of breath from the tirade. The room felt hot, sweltering with their collective anger and desperation. "Because if you are," I continued, "let me be clear. I am not loaning you the money. That is final. End of discussion. Then get out," Dad growled, collapsing back into his chair heavily. He couldn't even look at me anymore, his eyes fixed on the table. "Get out of my sight. If you walk out that door, don't ever come back. You are no daughter of mine. You're dead to us." "I've been dead to you for a long time, Dad," I said softly. "I just finally realized it and accepted it." "Go on then," Mia spat. "Take your cheap car and your cheap clothes and get lost. We'll find the money somewhere else. We don't need you or your judgment." "You won't find the money," I said matter-of-factly. "No reputable bank will touch you with your credit history. No investor worth their salt will look twice at those books. I'm the only one who even bothered to do the due diligence." "We will find a way," Mom insisted through her tears. "We always do. We are survivors, Elena. Reyes through and through." "You aren't survivors," I said, the words landing like a final verdict. "You're parasites." Mom gasped, her hand clutching her chest as if wounded. I stood up fully now, smoothing out my plain white tee. I picked up my tote bag. "I'm leaving," I announced. "But before I go, there is one more thing to address." I looked at Marcus. He had been standing like a statue through the entire screaming match, unflinching, professional to his core. He hadn't reacted to a single outburst. He knew the plan inside and out. "Marcus," I said, "show them the last document." Marcus stepped forward without a word. He didn't look intimidated by Dad's red face, or Mia's clenched fists, or Alex's sulking glare. He was a numbers guy, not swayed by tantrums. He placed a single thick document on the center of the table. It made a heavy, ominous thud. The cover was a deep blue, with a legal seal embossed on the front. "What is this?" Dad asked warily, his voice hoarse. He didn't touch it, eyeing it like it was a live bomb. "I told you I wouldn't give you a loan," I said. "And that's true. A loan implies trust. Implies I believe you can pay it back responsibly. I don't." I walked around the table slowly, my sneakers silent on the carpet. However, I continued, I am a businesswoman at heart, and when I see a distressed asset with underlying potential, I don't walk away. I act on it. Distressed asset? Mia asked, her brow furrowing in confusion. What the hell are you talking about? I knew about your financial troubles 3 weeks ago, I explained. My team monitors market opportunities constantly. Distressed properties, failing firms with redeemable value. We saw the default notice from First Union pop up in public filings. We saw the aggressive collection attempts from the Vegas lenders. I stopped behind my father's chair, placing a hand lightly on the backrest. I didn't come here to save you, Dad. I didn't come to bail you out. I came here to foreclose on you. Foreclose? Dad spun around in his chair so fast it creaked. You can't foreclose on us. You don't own the debt. You're not the lender. Actually, I said, nodding toward the blue folder. I do. Open it. Dad's hands were shaking uncontrollably as he reached for the cover. He could barely lift it. His eyes scanned the dense legal text on the first page, widening in horror as the reality sank in. His face drained of color, going from red to a terrifying shade of gray. This isn't possible, he whispered, his voice breaking. What? Mom asked frantically, leaning over. Carlos, what is it? Tell me. She bought the note, Dad whispered, as if saying it aloud made it real. She bought the mortgage, all of it. I acquired your debt from the Vegas lenders yesterday morning, I explained calmly, as if discussing the weather. They were thrilled to offload it. Thought you were heading for default anyway. I got it at 80 cents on the dollar. A real bargain considering the upside. And First Union? Dad asked, looking up at me with pure horror in his eyes. I acquired that debt this afternoon, I said. Marcus finalized the wire transfer while we were enjoying those appetizers earlier. I looked around the table at each of them. I own the mortgage on the office. I own the lien on the lake house. I own the debt on the company vehicles and equipment. I own the personal guarantees you signed. In short, I am your creditor. I am the bank. The silence in the room was absolute, a vacuum sucking out all sound. Alex dropped his fork. It clattered loudly against his plate, breaking the spell. You own everything? He asked, his voice small and childlike. Everything? Yes, I confirmed. I am the one holding the strings now. I leaned in close to my father, my voice low. So when you tell me to get out and never come back, you might want to be careful. Technically, you're sitting in a chair that's now part of my assets. Dad slumped back in his chair, defeated. All the bluster, all the anger, all the I am the patriarch energy drained out of him in an instant. He was just an old man now, one who owed a fortune to the daughter he'd underestimated his whole life. Why? Mom whispered, her face a mask of terror. Why would you do this to us? To ruin your own family? No, Mom, I said. Not to ruin. To save the business. But not for you. For me. And for what it could be under proper management. I signaled Marcus again. He pulled another set of papers from his briefcase, crisp and ready. These are the terms, I said. Since you're in default on both primary loans, I have the legal right to seize all collateralized assets immediately. I could have the sheriff evict you from the lake house tonight. I could padlock the office doors at dawn tomorrow. Mom let out a soft, pitiful whimper, covering her mouth. But, I continued, I'm not cruel. I'm not like you. I won't leave you with nothing. I slid a check across the table, face down. I am taking over full ownership of Reyes Advisors Group, effective immediately. The board is dissolved. All executive positions are terminated. I looked at Mia. You're fired. I looked at Dad. You're retired, forcibly. You can't just... Mia started to protest, but she stopped mid-sentence. She knew I could. The legal weight was ironclad. The check on the table, I said, tapping it, is a severance package. It's $150,000. That's for whatever equity you think you have left. It's more than the business is worth once the debts are factored in. Take it, sign the transfer papers, and you walk away clean. No outstanding debts, no lawsuits, no public bankruptcy filing. $150,000, Dad said weakly, his voice barely above a whisper. But the land alone, the value, the land is leveraged to the hilt, Dad. I interrupted. You own nothing free and clear. This is a gift. It's the last gift I will ever give any of you. And if we refuse? Uncle Luis asked, his voice shaky. Then I foreclose tomorrow, I said simply, shrugging. I take all the assets through the courts. You get nothing, not a dime. You file for bankruptcy. You lose the house, the cars, everything. And worst of all for you, everyone at this club will know. The Sunday paper will have the story. Carlos Reyes couldn't pay his bills. Local advisory firm collapses in debt scandal. And I let the threat hang there in the air. I knew that was the one thing they truly couldn't handle. They could stomach losing money in private. But losing face? The public humiliation. The gossip at the bridge club and golf course? For people like my parents, poverty was scary. But embarrassment was utterly fatal. You have 5 minutes to decide and sign, I said, checking my watch. A simple, inexpensive one on my wrist. Nothing flashy. The clock starts now. I walked over to the large window overlooking the golf course. It was dark outside, the greens illuminated by soft spotlights. I could see my reflection in the glass. Calm, composed, strong. Behind me, I heard the sounds of my family falling apart. Mom's soft crying, Mia's muttered curses, Alex's panicked whispers, and then the scratch of a pen on paper. They were signing their empire over to the daughter they'd forgotten, the one they'd dismissed. I didn't turn around. I didn't need to watch the surrender. I already knew how the story ended, with me in control. I waited until the pen scratches stopped. Then I turned back from the window. My father was holding the pen still, his hand shaking so hard that the tip tapped against the paper like a nervous heartbeat. Tap, tap, tap. He looked up at me one last time. There was no anger left in his eyes now, only raw desperation. He looked like a man standing on the edge of a cliff, realizing too late that the ground had already crumbled away beneath his feet. Elena, he croaked, his voice barely audible. Please, the legacy, the Reyes name, don't destroy it. The name is safe, Dad, I said coldly. I'm keeping it. I'm just changing the management to someone competent. He looked over at my mother. She was staring blankly at the stained tablecloth, weeping silently, her shoulders heaving. She gave him a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. She knew it was over. If they didn't sign, they'd face the full humiliation of a public foreclosure. They'd be dragged through the courts, their dirty laundry aired for all to see. Their friends at the club would read about their bankruptcy over coffee in the Sunday paper. For people like my parents, that kind of social death was worse than any financial loss. Dad looked back down at the paper. He pressed the pen down hard. He signed his name, Carlos Reyes. It was a messy, trembling scrawl. It looked like the signature of a defeated man, a surrender flag in ink. He pushed the paper away from him, as if it were contaminated, something poisonous. He dropped the pen. It rolled off the table and clattered to the floor. It's done, he whispered, the words hanging like a death knell. Marcus stepped forward immediately. He checked the signature meticulously, then stamped the document with a notary seal. He placed a copy of the countersigned agreement on the table in front of them. Thank you, Marcus said, his voice completely devoid of emotion or triumph. The transfer of ownership is legally binding as of this moment. I walked back to the table. I picked up the check, the $150,000 severance. I held it out to my father. Here, I said. He didn't take it. He just stared at his hands, folded in his lap, as if they belonged to someone else. Mia snatched it instead. She looked at the number, her eyes flashing with a mix of greed and panic. 150 grand, she muttered. That's like 37.5 each if we split it. That's nothing. That won't even buy a decent condo in this market. It's $150,000 more than you had 5 minutes ago, I said. And it's all you're getting. I turned to Alex. Alex, the keys. What? He said, his face turning even paler. No way. I need my car. How am I supposed to get home without it? Take an Uber, I suggested dryly. The sports car is a company vehicle. The company now belongs to me, and I don't let former employees drive off with assets. You can't do this, Alex whined, sounding like a teenager. What about my allowance? What about the trust fund Grandpa set up? The trust fund was invested back into the firm years ago, Alex, I said. Dad drained it 5 years back to pay for emergency roof repairs on the office. Didn't he tell you? Alex turned to Dad with horror in his eyes. You spent my money? My inheritance? Dad didn't answer. He was slumped in his chair, staring at nothing. A hollow shell of the man who'd boomed commands earlier. The great Carlos Reyes, the figure who'd terrified and belittled me for 2 decades, was reduced to an empty suit. And the house? Mom asked, her voice trembling as she clutched her napkin. The lake house, Elena? Surely you won't take that too. Where will we live? It's our home. I looked at my mother. I remembered the way she'd looked at me as a child, like I was an inconvenient stain on her perfect life. I remembered how she'd ignored my calls, prioritized Alex's parties over my achievements. The lake house is collateral on the First Union loan, I said. It belongs to the bank now, and since I am the bank, it's mine. I paused, letting the reality sink in deep. I am giving you 30 days to vacate the property. That is generous. Most banks would give you 10 days max. 30 days? Mom gasped, clutching her pearls tightly. But a rental? I can't live in a rental apartment like common people. What will the girls at the club say? The humiliation. Tell them you're downsizing for simplicity, I suggested without sympathy. Or tell them the truth, that you spent decades pretending to be rich while neglecting the actual business that funded it all. Uncle Luis, who had been uncharacteristically silent since the bankruptcy threat, suddenly stood up. He swayed a little from the bourbon. You're a monster, he spat at me, his finger jabbing unsteadily. A cold-hearted, calculating monster. Family is supposed to stick together through thick and thin. What happened to loyalty? To blood being thicker than water? Loyalty is a two-way street, Uncle Luis, I said. Yours has always been one way. Loyal to the money, not to the people, not to me. I looked at them all one last time, taking in the scene. Dad broken and defeated. Mom terrified of her crumbling social standing. Mia and Alex realizing for the first time they'd have to work for a living. Uncle Luis a drunk old leech with no more host to feed on. I waited for the wave of sadness to hit me, for the guilt to creep in. I waited to feel bad for them, to second-guess my plan. But the sadness never came. Instead, I felt a massive weight lift off my chest. It was a physical sensation, my shoulders relaxing, my lungs expanding fully for what felt like the first time in years. I realized that for my entire life, I'd been carrying their expectations like a backpack full of rocks. I'd been lugging around their judgments, their dismissals, trying desperately to fill a bucket of love that had a gaping hole in the bottom. Now, I put the bucket down. I dropped the backpack. I was free. Marcus, I said, handle the keys and any immediate transfers. Yes, ma'am, Marcus replied efficiently. He held out his hand to Alex. Alex looked at me, then at Marcus, cursing under his breath. He dug into his pocket and slammed the sports car keys into Marcus's palm. I hope you choke on it, Alex said to me, his eyes full of venom. I won't, I said. I have very good digestion when it comes to bad investments. I turned my back on them then, walking toward the heavy wooden doors. Elena, Dad called out weakly, his voice cracking. Elena, wait. I stopped, my hand on the brass handle. I didn't turn around. What? I asked the door. We did love you, he said, the words sounding forced, desperate. In our own way. You have to believe that. I stood there for a second, letting the statement hang. I thought about the empty chairs at my celebration dinner. I thought about the text message that only came after the WSJ article. I thought about the years of silence, the indifference. No, Dad, I said softly to the door. You loved having a daughter you could ignore until she became useful to you. That isn't love. That's ownership. And I'm not for sale anymore. I pushed the door open firmly. It clicked shut behind me with a solid final sound, like the closing of a vault, locking away the past. I walked through the lobby of the golf club. It was quiet now, the dinner rush long over. A few members lingered in the lounge, sipping brandy, and discussing stock tips or golf scores in hushed tones. They looked up as I passed in my plain clothes. They didn't know who I was. They didn't know that the unassuming woman in the white tee and jeans had just acquired their club's biggest outstanding debt. To them, I was a nobody. I smiled inwardly. I liked being a nobody to them. It meant I was finally free from the need to prove anything. I walked out the front doors into the cool night air. It was crisp, invigorating, with a hint of autumn chill. The sky was clear, stars twinkling overhead like distant promises. Inside that room, the air had been hot and suffocating, thick with lies, perfume, and desperation. Out here, the air was clean, fresh. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs. It tasted like freedom, like possibility. I walked down the stone steps to the parking lot. The valet saw me coming and glanced at my ticket stub. He frowned slightly, remembering. "The hatchback?" he asked, wrinkling his nose a bit at the thought. "Yes," I said. "The hatchback." He jogged off to retrieve it. While I waited, I pulled my phone out of my pocket. There was a new text message, timestamped 2 minutes ago. It was from Mom. "Sweetie, please, let's talk about this. We can fix it. I'll make Dad apologize for everything. Just come back inside. We can work something out. You're my baby girl." I stared at the words baby girl. She only pulled that out when she wanted to manipulate, to tug at old heartstrings. She was still trying, even now, after the papers were signed. She thought she could pull the string one more time and make me dance back into the fold. She thought I was still that desperate little girl, waiting for scraps of approval. But I didn't feel angry anymore. I just felt done, completely, utterly done. I tapped the 3 dots in the corner of the screen. I selected block caller. Then I went to Dad's contact. Block. Mia. Block. Alex. Block. Uncle Luis. Block. I watched the names disappear from my active list one by one. It was like digital surgery, cutting out the infection before it could spread further. The valet pulled up in my 2014 hatchback. The engine rattled a bit. The brakes squeaked as he stopped. It looked ridiculous, parked amid the lineup of Mercedes and BMWs, a humble relic. The valet got out and held the door open for me. He looked like he expected maybe a small tip, but also like he judged me for driving such junk. I reached into my tote. I pulled out a $50 bill, crisp, from my wallet. I handed it to him. "Keep the change," I said. His eyes went wide with surprise. "Thank you, ma'am. Have a great night." I got into the car. The seat was worn but familiar, molding to me like an old friend. The steering wheel was peeling slightly at the edges. It was imperfect, a bit rough around the edges, but it was mine. I'd bought it with my own money from my first real paycheck. I'd paid for the gas, the insurance, the maintenance. I didn't owe a single cent on this car to anyone. I started the engine. It roared to life with its characteristic grumble. I drove down the long, winding driveway, past the perfect flower beds and hedges, past the security gate where the guard waved without interest. I turned onto the main road, heading back to the city. I rolled down all the windows, letting the cool night wind whip through the cabin, tousling my hair. I thought about what I was leaving behind forever. A family legacy built on lies and neglect, the constant chase for approval from people who were never worthy of it, the shame of being the overlooked black sheep. I thought about what lay ahead, my thriving firm, my dedicated employees who respected me for my merit, my own home that I'd earned, a future I controlled entirely. I realized then that revenge isn't about hurting the people who hurt you. It's not about screaming matches or making them suffer in kind. Real revenge is simply thriving without them. Real revenge is becoming so whole, so self-sufficient, that they cease to matter at all. They become footnotes in your story, just small, sad scribbles at the bottom of the page, easily overlooked. I turned up the radio. My favorite song was playing, upbeat and empowering. I started to hum along, then sing softly. I looked in the rearview mirror one last time. The lights of the golf club were fading into the distance, shrinking to tiny specks in the dark. Then I turned my eyes back to the road ahead. The headlights cut through the blackness, illuminating the path forward. I wasn't the victim anymore. I wasn't the invisible daughter. I wasn't even the bank. I was Elena. And for the first time in my life, I was driving my own car on my own road, going exactly where I wanted to go, with no one to answer to but myself. Have you ever had to outgrow someone to save yourself?